I have spent enough years watching people to know this much. We often look right past the ones who matter most. We notice the loud voices, the confident smiles, the people who take up space. But the quiet ones, the patient ones, the ones standing just outside the spotlight, they are usually the ones who see everything. And sometimes, they are waiting for us to finally see them back. The bet was simple. Daniel Hayes set down his whiskey glass and looked across the table at Victor Blake. Crystal chandeliers hung above leather chairs and cigar smoke, the kind of room where men decided fates between drinks. "Any woman," Victor said. 30 days. Make her say yes to marriage." Daniel smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was easy. He chose her the next morning. A small café on Maple Street. The woman behind the counter moved quietly, no makeup, no jewelry, nothing asking to be noticed. She seemed forgettable, perfect. He approached, prepared his opening line, but before he spoke, she set a cup in front of him. Black coffee, no sugar. "Same as always?" she said. Daniel's hand froze. He had never been here before in his life. Daniel did not correct her. He wrapped his fingers around the warm cup and carried it to a table by the window. The coffee was exactly right, strong, bitter, the way he had taken it for 30 years. A lucky guess. That was all. He watched her move between tables, refilling cups, clearing plates. Her hands never stopped, but her eyes swept the room in slow, careful arcs. She looked at everyone the same way, measuring, noting. When she passed his table, she did not glance down. He came back the next day, and the day after that. By the 4th morning, he knew her name was Margaret. He knew she arrived at 6 and left at 2. He knew she read during her breaks the same worn paperback with a cracked spine. He knew nothing else. On the 5th day, Daniel found her in the park near the café. She sat on a bench, the book open in her lap, her shoulders relaxed in the afternoon sun. He sat down beside her without asking. "I have a proposition," he said. "A marriage contract, 1 year. You would have financial security, a home, anything you need." Margaret closed the book. Her thumb held the page. "What do you get? Company." She studied his face. The silence stretched long enough that he heard the rustle of leaves overhead, the distant bark of a dog, the creak of the bench beneath him. "One condition," she said. "You don't ask about my past." Daniel nearly laughed. His own closets held enough locked doors. "I wasn't planning to share mine either." "Then we understand each other." She stood, extended her hand. Her grip was dry and firm, gone before he could register the warmth. "When?" she asked. "End of the week." She nodded once and walked away. The wedding took 11 minutes, a government office, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a clerk who stamped the papers without looking up. Margaret signed her name in quick, decisive strokes. When Daniel's turn came, she watched his pen move across the page. Her eyes traced each letter of his name, slow, deliberate, the way someone reads a sentence they already know by heart. Then it was done. That night, in the penthouse, she stood at the window looking out at the city lights. "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked. She did not turn around. "I'm thinking how long it's been since I've seen this city from somewhere high." The answer made sense, but her voice carried something underneath a weight he could not name. She said goodnight and disappeared down the hall. Daniel stood alone in the living room. For the first time in years, the silence in his home felt different. It felt like someone was listening. 2 weeks passed like water through open fingers. Margaret kept to the edges of the penthouse. She woke before dawn, made coffee, and settled into the chair by the tall windows with that same worn paperback. She never asked for anything, never moved his belongings, never filled the rooms with noise or demands. She lived like a guest who had already packed her bags. Daniel found himself noticing small things, the way she held her cup with both hands, the way she turned pages slowly, as if each one cost something, the way she looked at the city below, not with wonder, but with the careful attention of someone memorizing a map. He told himself it was curiosity, the same instinct that had built his fortune watching, waiting, reading the patterns others missed. But this pattern would not resolve. One afternoon, Daniel left the office early. The elevator doors opened to an unfamiliar smell, onions softening in butter, herbs he could not name. He followed the scent to the kitchen. Margaret stood at the stove, stirring a pot. Simple ingredients lined the counter. Tomatoes, carrots, a handful of celery, nothing expensive. "You cook," he said from the doorway. "Sometimes." She did not turn around. He sat at the table and waited. She ladled soup into 2 white bowls and set one before him. Steam rose in thin curls. The smell wrapped around him like a hand reaching out of the past. He lifted the spoon, tasted. His throat tightened. This soup. He knew this soup. His mother had made it on winter Sundays when he was a boy. Carrots cut in coins. Celery soft but not mushy. A pinch of something at the end time. Maybe. Or marjoram. He had not tasted it in 25 years. Had not spoken of it to anyone. Not his ex-wife, not his partners, not a living soul. "Where did you learn this?" His voice came out rough. Margaret sat across from him. Her spoon rested beside her bowl, untouched. "I guessed," she said. "You seemed like someone who missed simple things." The words were reasonable. The explanation made sense. But Daniel's hands had gone cold around the warm bowl. Because that was not a guess. That was not intuition. That was something else entirely. He did not sleep that night. The bedroom ceiling stretched gray above him, through the walls. Silence. Margaret's room lay 20 feet down the hall, her door closed, her light off. He replayed the evening. The smell of the soup. The taste that had pulled him backward through decades. The steadiness in her eyes when she answered his question. She had not blinked, had not hesitated, had not looked away even once. Most people flinched when they lied. Most people gave themselves away in small movements, a glance to the left, a hand touching the face, a pause 1 beat too long. Margaret had done none of those things. Either she was telling the truth, or she was better at lying than anyone he had ever met. The next morning, Daniel woke before dawn. He moved quietly through the penthouse, past the kitchen, past the living room, until he reached the window where she always sat. Her book lay on the small table beside the chair, the same paperback, the same cracked spine. He picked it up, turned it over in his hands. The cover was blank. No title, no author name. Strange for a published book. He opened to the first page. Handwriting, small, slanted, careful, dated entries running down the page. Not a novel, a journal. Daniel's pulse kicked against his ribs. He turned to a random page and read the first line. "There is a name I will never forget. A signature on the papers that destroyed us." He closed the book, set it back exactly where he had found it. His hands were shaking. Daniel did not touch the journal again. He returned it to the exact position he had found it, spine facing out, edge aligned with the corner of the table. Then he walked to the kitchen, poured himself coffee, and sat in the gray morning light with his hands wrapped around the cup. The words circled through his mind, a signature on the papers that destroyed us. Us, not me. Us, a family, a business, something that had belonged to more than one person. He heard her door open down the hall. Soft footsteps on carpet. The bathroom faucet running. The small sounds of someone beginning their day. When Margaret appeared in the kitchen doorway, her hair was damp, her face bare. She glanced at him, then at the coffee pot. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." She poured her own cup and sat across from him. The morning light caught the fine lines at the corners of her eyes. She looked older in this light, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "Bad dreams?" she asked, something like that. They drank in silence. Outside, the city was waking distant horns, the rumble of trucks, a siren rising and falling somewhere to the east. Daniel watched her over the rim of his cup. She held hers with both hands again, the same way she always did. Her eyes moved to the window, to the skyline, to something beyond the glass he could not see. "Who are you?" he thought. "And what did I do to you?" That afternoon, Daniel called his assistant from behind his closed office door. "I need a background check," he said. "Full workup. Margaret Hayes, current address is mine." A pause on the line. "Sir, that's your wife. I know who she is. Run it anyway." He hung up before she could respond. The report arrived 3 days later. Daniel read it twice. Locked in his study with the blinds drawn. Margaret Hayes, age 32, employment history café server, 6 months. Before that, nothing. No prior addresses. No credit history before 2019. No family contacts listed. No social media presence. 5 years of existence. Before that, a blank page. His assistant had attached a note. Records appear unusually clean. Possible name change or sealed documents. Recommend a private investigator for deeper search. Daniel leaned back in his chair. The leather creaked beneath him. People did not simply appear. Everyone left a trail: utility bills, old leases, parking tickets, something. Everyone had a history that followed them. Unless they had erased it. He came home early that evening. The elevator opened onto silence. Then a voice. Low. Clipped. Unfamiliar. He moved quietly through the foyer and stopped at the edge of the living room. Margaret stood on the balcony, her back to the glass doors, phone pressed to her ear. The sliding door was cracked open just enough for her words to carry. "Not yet," she said. "I'll reach out when it's time." Silence. She was listening. "He's getting curious." "That was expected. It doesn't change anything." Daniel pressed himself against the wall. His heartbeat thudded in his ears. "I said I'll handle it." She ended the call, slipped the phone into her pocket, stood motionless for a long moment, looking out at the skyline. Then she turned and walked inside. Their eyes met. Her expression did not change. No surprise, no alarm, just that same steady gaze, calm as still water. "You're home early," she said. "Who was that? An old friend?" Sounded like more than a friend. She moved past him toward the kitchen. "You're imagining things." He caught her arm. Not hard, but enough to stop her. "Margaret." She looked down at his hand, then up at his face. Her eyes held nothing he could read. "You have questions," she said. "I've counted 17 of them so far, but you haven't asked the one that actually matters." His grip loosened. "Which question is that? Why I said yes." She pulled her arm free and walked away. Daniel stood rooted to the floor. The city hummed beyond the windows. The refrigerator clicked and whirred in the kitchen. 17 questions. She had been counting. She had been watching him just as closely as he had been watching her, maybe closer. That night, he opened his laptop and typed her name into the search bar. Then he deleted it. Instead, he typed business acquisitions 2019 plus family bankruptcy plus hostile takeover. The results filled the screen. Dozens of entries, hundreds of companies. He began to read. 6 weeks crawled by. Daniel hired a private investigator, a former federal agent who charged more per day than most people earned in a month. The man was thorough, discreet, patient. He sent updates every few days. Bank records, employment histories, property searches across 12 states, all dead ends, until the call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Daniel was in his office, staring at quarterly reports he could not focus on. His phone buzzed. He answered on the first ring. "Found something," the investigator said. "Your wife had another name before 2019. Eleanor Webb." Daniel wrote it on the notepad in front of him. The pen pressed hard enough to dent the paper beneath. "Webb," he repeated. The Webb family owned a small business, furniture manufacturing. 3 generations, family gobos operation out of Ohio. What happened to them? Went under in 2019. Hostile acquisition. A larger company bought up their debts, called in the loans, seized the assets. Standard squeeze play. Daniel's mouth went dry. He knew that playbook. He had run it himself more times than he could count. The father, the investigator continued. Papers rustled on the other end. Thomas Webb. He couldn't handle the loss. Took his own life 3 weeks after signing over the company. The office walls seemed to press inward. Daniel loosened his tie. And the daughter, Eleanor Webb, only child. She disappeared shortly after her mother died stroke. 6 months after the father, the daughter was listed as deceased in a car accident later that year. Closed casket. Insurance paid out to distant relatives. But she's not dead. Obviously not. Someone went through considerable trouble to erase her. New identity, clean records, professional work. Expensive. Daniel stared at the name on his notepad. Eleanor Webb. The company that acquired them, he said. His voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. What was it called? A pause. Hayes Capital. The phone nearly slipped from Daniel's hand. There's more, the investigator said. I pulled the original acquisition paperwork. Your signature is on the final authorization. You personally approved the takeover. Daniel could not speak. His throat had closed. Sir, you still there? Send me everything. Already in your inbox. The line went dead. Daniel sat motionless for an hour. He did not check his email, did not call anyone, did not move from the chair. 5 years ago, he had signed hundreds of documents that year, thousands of authorizations. He could not remember a single one. Webb and Family Furniture, a small company, a family business. He had signed papers that ended it, signed them without reading. Probably. Without thinking about who was on the other side, Thomas Webb had taken his own life. His wife had followed 6 months later, and their daughter had erased herself from existence only to reappear in Daniel's penthouse, cooking his mother's soup, watching him with those patient, careful eyes. The archive room was in the basement of Hayes Capital headquarters, rows of filing cabinets stretched under fluorescent lights. The air smelled of dust and old paper. Daniel found the 2019 files in the third row, Webb and Family. A thin folder the company had not been significant enough to warrant much documentation. He opened it. Acquisition proposal, financial assessment, risk analysis, projected returns, all standard, all routine, and at the bottom the authorization form, his signature, bold, confident strokes, the handwriting of a man who never questioned what he was signing. Daniel stared at the ink. 5 years old, faded slightly at the edges, his own name, written in his own hand. A name that had destroyed a family. He flipped through more pages and found a photograph clipped to an internal memo. Thomas Webb, gray-haired, mid-50s, tired eyes, standing in front of his factory with a young woman beside him, dark hair, sharp features, a cautious smile. Eleanor, Margaret, the same face, 5 years younger, but unmistakable. Daniel's hands began to shake. The photograph trembled between his fingers. He drove home in silence. The city passed in fragments, brake lights, crosswalks, storefronts lit against the evening dark. None of it registered. His mind was full of signatures and photographs and a dead man's face. The elevator ride took forever. When the doors opened, Margaret was in the kitchen, same as always, preparing dinner. The smell of garlic and rosemary filled the air. She turned and smiled. Long day. Daniel set his briefcase on the counter. His keys clattered against the marble. She had known from the beginning. Every smile, every meal, every carefully chosen word, all of it calculated. He looked at her now and saw someone else entirely. Eleanor Webb, daughter of Thomas Webb, the man whose death warrant Daniel had signed without a second thought. She was still smiling. "Dinner's almost ready," she said. "Sit down. You look tired." Daniel did not move. The question pressed against his teeth, the question he should have asked from the very first day. But standing here now, looking at those steady hands, that calm face, that patience that had outlasted every suspicion, he understood something else. She had been waiting for this moment, and he still did not know what came next. Daniel did not confront her that night. He sat through dinner, cut his food into small pieces, moved them around his plate, answered her questions with half-sentences he could not remember seconds later. Margaret watched him across the table. She did not press, did not ask what was wrong, just ate her meal in that quiet, measured way of hers and cleared the dishes when they were done. "Good night," she said from the hallway. "Good night." Her door clicked shut. Daniel sat alone in the dark living room until well past midnight. The city lights glittered beyond the windows. Somewhere out there, 5 years ago, a man had signed away everything his family had built, and 3 weeks later, he had decided he could not go on. Thomas Webb. Daniel tried to picture him. The photograph in the file had shown a tired man with kind eyes, A man who had spent his life building something with his hands. A man who had trusted that the world operated on fairness and hard work. Daniel had never met him, had never known his name, had signed the paper that ended his company between two other documents, probably while answering emails, probably while thinking about the next deal. Business was business. He had said that phrase 1,000 times. It had always sounded reasonable before. The next morning, Daniel waited until Margaret left for her walk. He stood outside her bedroom door for a full minute. His hand rested on the knob. His pulse beat slow and heavy in his ears. They had an agreement. No questions about the past. He was about to break it. The door opened silently. Her room was sparse, a neatly made bed, a small dresser, a lamp on the nightstand, no photographs, no decorations, nothing personal except the worn paperback on the table by the window. He crossed the room and picked up the journal. The cover felt soft from years of handling. The spine cracked as he opened it. The handwriting was small and slanted. Each entry dated. Each page filled edge to edge. March 15th, 2019. Dad says everything will be fine. He said it 3 times at dinner. He only repeats himself when he's scared. Daniel turned the page. March 22nd, 2019. Men in suits came to the factory today. They walked through like they already owned the place. Dad followed them, explaining everything. They didn't listen. They just took notes and left. April 3rd, 2019. It's over. Dad signed the papers this morning. 42 years, 3 generations, gone in 1 afternoon. He didn't eat dinner, didn't speak, just sat in his chair and stared at the wall until Mom made him go to bed. Daniel's throat tightened. He forced himself to continue. April 18th, 2019. Dad is gone. I found him this morning, in the garage. I can't write more than that. I can't. The ink was smudged. Water stains warped the paper. Dried tears soaked into the page. May, 2019. Mom had a stroke last night. The doctors say stress. I say murder. Someone killed my parents without ever touching them. There is a name I will never forget. A signature on the papers that took everything from us. Daniel closed his eyes. His hands were trembling. June, 2019. I buried Mom today. I am alone now. But I have made a decision. I am going to find him. I am going to make him understand what he did. Not revenge. I don't want revenge. I want something harder than that. I want him to see. The front door opened. Daniel's head snapped up. Footsteps in the hallway. The rustle of a jacket being removed. He set the journal down. Exactly where he had found it. Turned toward the door. Margaret appeared in the doorway. Her eyes moved from his face to the book on the table. Back to his face. Neither of them spoke. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. You read it, she said. Her voice was flat. No anger, no surprise. Daniel could not find words. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. She stepped into the room, calm, unhurried. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked up at him. I wondered how long it would take. A pause. You're more patient than I expected. You planned this. His voice came out hoarse, broken. All of it? Yes. The café, the bet, everything. Not the bet. That was Victor's idea. She tilted her head slightly. But when he told me about it, when he mentioned your name, I knew it was time. Daniel's blood ran cold. Victor. Margaret's expression did not change. He's been useful. He has his own reasons for wanting to watch you fall. I have mine. Different goals. Same target. The room tilted. Daniel braced himself against the dresser. Victor, his oldest friend, his partner on 100 deals, the man who had proposed the bet in the first place. He set me up, Daniel said. He set us both up. Margaret stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city below. He's been playing a longer game than either of us knew. She turned to face him. But that's a conversation for tomorrow. Tonight? You should sleep. You look like you need it. She moved toward the door. Wait. Daniel's voice stopped her. Why didn't you just destroy me? You had 5 years. You could have ruined me 100 different ways. Margaret paused in the doorway. The afternoon light fell across half her face, leaving the other half in shadow. Because destruction is easy, she said quietly. My father deserved more than easy. She was gone before he could respond. Daniel found Victor at their usual club the next evening. The older man sat in a leather chair by the fireplace, a whiskey in hand, the flames casting shifting shadows across his face. He looked relaxed, comfortable, like a man who had already won. Daniel. Victor raised his glass. I was wondering when you'd come. Daniel did not sit, did not take a drink. He stood before his oldest friend and felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. You knew who she was. His voice was steady, but his hands were not. From the beginning. Victor sipped his whiskey, swirled the amber liquid in the glass. Of course I did. The web acquisition, the shell companies, the squeeze play. Daniel's jaw tightened. You engineered the whole thing. Someone had to. Victor set down his glass. You were getting soft, Daniel, asking questions, worrying about consequences. I did what needed to be done. You used my signature. You gave it freely. Victor smiled. You didn't read the details. You never do. That's why you have me. Daniel's stomach turned. 5 years of partnership, 20 years of friendship, all of it built on lies. Thomas Webb killed himself because of what we did. What you did? Victor's smile widened. Your name is on those papers, not mine. I made sure of that. Why? The word came out, broken. Why would you do this? Victor stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city lights. Because you never saw me. His voice was calm, cold. 30 years I've stood beside you, made you rich, protected your reputation, and not once, did you treat me as an equal. He turned. You wanted to know if Margaret was using you. The answer is yes, but so was I. So is everyone. Welcome to your own game. Daniel. Daniel's fists clenched at his sides. She told me you set us both up. Did she? Victor chuckled. Smart girl. But she doesn't know everything. I have copies of every document, every transaction, every signature. One call to the right journalist, and your world burns. He picked up his whiskey again. Go home, Daniel. Play house with your little widow. The endgame is already in motion. Daniel walked out into the rain. The water soaked through his coat in seconds. He didn't notice. Didn't care. 30 years. The man he had trusted most. The partner he had built an empire with. All of it a lie. When he reached the penthouse, Margaret was sitting in the living room, waiting. The city lights painted her in shades of blue and gold. She looked up when he entered, said nothing, just watched. Daniel stood in the doorway, dripping onto the hardwood floor. "He told me everything," he said. "Victor, not everything." She uncrossed her legs, stood. "Sit down. You're shivering." He sat. She brought a towel from the bathroom, handed it to him without touching. "I spent 8 months studying you," she said. "Before I ever walked into that cafe, I read every interview, tracked every deal, talked to former employees, former partners, anyone who would speak." Daniel pressed the towel to his face. It smelled like lavender. "I talked to your ex-wife's sister." Margaret sat across from him. "She told me you still send birthday cards to your niece, that you paid for her college without being asked. I talked to your childhood housekeeper, the one you kept on payroll even after she retired. She's the one who gave me the soup recipe." Daniel's head snapped up. "Mrs. Patterson? She remembered your mother, said the soup was the only thing that made you smile after she died." The room blurred. Daniel blinked hard. "Why are you telling me this?" Margaret leaned forward. Her hands rested on her knees. "Because I needed to know if you were worth saving. If there was anything left beneath the signatures and the deals and the zeros in your bank account. And," she held his gaze, "the jury is still out." Daniel spent 3 days locked in his study. He did not go to the office, did not answer calls, did not eat unless Margaret left food outside his door. He pulled every file from 2019, every email, every memo, every transaction log. He spread them across his desk, across the floor, across every flat surface in the room. And he traced Victor's scheme from beginning to end. Shell companies in Delaware and the Caymans, supplier contracts mysteriously canceled, credit lines frozen without explanation, a coordinated squeeze play designed to look like market forces. Victor had built it all. But Daniel's signature sat at the bottom of every authorization. The law would not care who planned it. The law would only see who approved it. On the 3rd night, Margaret knocked on the door. "You need to eat." Daniel looked up from the papers. His eyes were bloodshot. His shirt was wrinkled. He had not shaved in days. "I know what he did," Daniel said. "I know everything." Margaret stepped into the room, surveyed the chaos of documents. "And now I have to decide what kind of man I am." She was quiet for a long moment. "What kind do you want to be?" Daniel looked at her, the woman who had lost everything because of his carelessness, the woman who had spent 5 years planning this moment. "Different," he said, "different from him." The clock on the wall read 2:14 a.m. Daniel sat alone in the study, surrounded by evidence of his own complicity. The city slept beyond the windows. The building hummed with distant machinery. He thought about Thomas Webb, about a man who had built something with his hands and lost it to someone who had never even learned his name. He thought about Eleanor, about the girl in the photograph, about the woman sleeping 20 feet down the hall. He thought about the signatures, his own handwriting, the same loops and lines he had used 1,000 times, the same casual authority that had ended lives without his even knowing. And he made a decision. At 3 a.m., Daniel began to pack the documents into boxes, not randomly, methodically, each file sorted, labeled, organized, the Webb acquisition, the Shell Company records, Victor's internal memos, his own authorizations, every piece of evidence that proved what had been done. At 5 a.m., he addressed a package, plain brown paper, block letters, SEC Fraud Division, Washington, D.C. Margaret was standing in the doorway when he finished. "What are you doing?" Daniel sealed the package with tape. His hands were steady. "Turning myself in." She did not move, did not speak, just watched him with those careful eyes. "Victor was right about one thing," Daniel said. "My name is on those papers, my signature, my responsibility." "You could fight it. Blame him. You have resources." "I could." Daniel set down the tape. "But that man Thomas Webb, he didn't have resources. He didn't have lawyers. He just had a business his family had built over 3 generations, and I signed it away without a second thought." He looked at her. "I can't undo that, but I can stop pretending it wasn't my fault." Margaret crossed the room, stopped in front of him. "I have something you should see." She pulled a folded paper from her pocket, handed it to him. Daniel unfolded it. Handwriting he recognized Victor's distinctive scrawl in the margins of an internal memo. Make sure Hayes signs without reading. He never checks the details. "I've had this for 2 years, Margaret said. "Victor's handwritten notes, proof that he deliberately manipulated you." Daniel stared at the paper. It could reduce your sentence, maybe eliminate it, shift the blame to him." He looked up at her. "Why didn't you use it? I was saving it." Her voice was quiet. "Leverage. Insurance. I wasn't sure which way you would go." Daniel held out the paper. "Send it to the SEC. With everything else. But I don't want to escape this. I want to face it." Margaret took the paper, looked at it for a long moment. Then she folded it carefully and slipped it into an envelope. "I'll mail it separately," she said. "So they know it came from a different source." Daniel nodded. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." She turned toward the door. "The next part is going to be hard." She was right. The sun rose over the city as Daniel sat in his study, watching the light spread across the buildings below. In a few hours, he would take the package to the post office himself. No lawyers, no intermediaries, just a man with a box of evidence and a decision he could not take back. The waiting was over. The reckoning had begun. 18 months later, the federal investigation had taken 14 months. Depositions, document reviews, grand jury proceedings. The wheels of justice ground slowly, but they ground fine. Daniel had pleaded guilty to securities fraud and conspiracy. His lawyers had argued for leniency cooperation. First offense, voluntary disclosure. The judge had listened, considered. 3 years federal prison, reduced to 18 months for full cooperation and the evidence he had provided against Victor. Victor Blake received 12 years. The margin notes Margaret had saved proved deliberate fraud, wire manipulation, and obstruction. His appeals were denied, his assets frozen, his reputation destroyed. Hayes Capital was sold off piece by piece. The name disappeared from buildings across the city, and Daniel served his time. When he walked out of the minimum security facility, no cameras waited, no reporters. The world had moved on. He took a bus to the city, rented a small apartment, started over. The Webb Family Foundation operated out of a converted warehouse on the east side. 3 employees, a modest budget. They helped small family businesses navigate hostile takeovers, provided legal resources, connected them with fair lending alternatives. It was not much, but it was something. On a Tuesday afternoon in October, Daniel walked into a café on Maple Street. The same café, the same corner table by the window, the same worn floorboards and chipped mugs, Margaret was already there. She looked different, lighter somehow. Her hair was longer. She wore a blue sweater he had never seen before. "You came," she said. "You asked." He sat across from her. The table was small. Their knees almost touched. "Coffee, please." She raised a hand. The server came. 2 cups appeared between them, steam rising in lazy curls. "I'm leaving the city," Margaret said. "Next week. There's a nonprofit in Portland that does similar work to yours. They offered me a position." Daniel nodded. He had expected this. "What about us?" She smiled. It was the first genuine smile he had seen from her. There was never an us. Daniel. There was a reckoning. And now it's done. He should have felt hurt. Instead, he felt something closer to relief. "Did you find what you were looking for?" he asked. Margaret wrapped her hands around her cup. The same gesture he remembered from the penthouse. Some things did not change. "I wanted you to see," she said quietly, "to really see what you had done. Not just the numbers, not just the signatures, the people. And did I?" She reached into her bag, pulled out something small. A photograph. Thomas Webb, standing in front of his factory. The same picture Daniel had found in the archive 5 years ago. "My father," she said. "He was a good man. He built something with his hands. He loved his family. He trusted that the world would be fair." She placed the photo on the table between them. "Keep it." Daniel picked up the photograph. The paper was worn at the edges, the image slightly faded. "I don't deserve this." "No," Margaret agreed. "But maybe that's the point. Maybe carrying what you don't deserve is part of making it right." She stood, pulled on her jacket. "Goodbye, Daniel. Eleanor." She paused. It was the first time he had used her real name. "Thank you," he said, "for not destroying me, for giving me the chance to destroy myself properly." She almost laughed. Almost. That's a strange thing to be grateful for. "Strange times," she nodded once. "Take care of yourself, and take care of the foundation. It's a good start." She walked toward the door. Daniel looked down at the photograph in his hands. Thomas Webb's kind eyes stared back at him. A man he had never met. A life he had ended without knowing. The weight of it would never leave him. He understood that now. But maybe that was okay. He raised his hand. The server appeared. "Another coffee," he said. "This time with sugar." The server smiled. "Coming right up." Daniel sat back in his chair, outside the window. The city moved on, people walking, cars passing, lives intersecting and separating in patterns too complex to trace. Margaret Eleanor paused at the door, looked back once. Then she was gone. Daniel stayed in the café for another hour. He drank his coffee slowly, watched the light change through the windows, thought about the foundation, about the families they had helped, about the ones they hadn't reached in time. When he finally left, he walked slowly through the streets. He passed a young woman working behind the counter of another café. She looked tired, worn down by long hours and low pay. The kind of person he had never noticed before. The kind of person he had destroyed without ever seeing. He stopped, looked at her, really looked. And for the first time in his life, Daniel Hayes saw someone else clearly. It was not redemption. It was not absolution. but it was a beginning.